Starting with an elevated welcoming bite can do wonders. So today I'm going to share with you 3 welcoming bites that I really love to use and that, in all honesty, have no business being as bougie as they are for how simple they are to put together. Hi Chefeteers, I'm Chef Nakia and I want you to be more confident in the kitchen and confident hosting dinner parties. To be specifically talking about the beginning of your dinner party or event or cocktail hour, those first moments as your guests are arriving, and it's really setting the tone for the rest of the evening. Sometimes this can be one of the more stressful times of the evening, but whenever people arrive, you want them to feel instantly welcomed and delighted and, set up to have a really beautiful and enjoyable, relaxing evening. And so I believe that one of the best ways that you can make yourself feel more relaxed is by having a welcoming bite available for everybody to snack on as soon as they arrive. This way, if dinner is running a little bit behind, that you are prepared with something already ready for your guests, and you don't have to let that a little bit of a later meal stress you out. And bonus, if your welcoming bite is a little fancier, a little bit more upscale, then that can really set the tone of your whole entire event just a little bit more elevated, which can be super fun. You may not always need this, and you may have some gatherings that you want to intentionally keep very casual, but for those times whenever maybe you do want to impress people, starting with an elevated welcoming bite can do wonders. So today I'm going to share with you 3 welcoming bites that I really love to use. 3 of my favorite fancy yet super simple to make welcoming bites, amuse bouches, past hors d'oeuvres, light appetizers, whatever you want to call them. Trout stuffed mushrooms, chicken pesto crisps, and tomatillo and strawberry beef. And now I do still love a delicious charcuterie board as a welcoming bite. However, for this, we're thinking about dishes that are a little bit more unique and a little bit of an unexpected snack for your guests to enjoy. If you do want to learn more about charcuterie boards, I have a video that I made a few years ago, fun theme ideas, and also depending on your guest count, your party size, how much of each component you should plan to have. But for today, let's get into details about this welcoming bite. There are 2 main reasons why I really enjoy including a welcoming bite. The first one has to do with my own stress levels. So if I have something available for people to begin eating as soon as they arrive, then I feel like I'm buying myself time with dinner so that I don't need to have dinner ready exactly at the right minute, especially as your guests are slowly arriving. And if some people end up being a little bit later than planned, well, dinner is ready, but not everybody is ready to sit down to eat yet. So either I can rush people to the table, or the food's gonna be a little cooler, a little less than the best quality when people eat. And that's really not the best, position to find yourself in. So if I have welcoming bites available, then I don't mind delaying dinner an extra 15-20 minutes to let those last guests arrive, mingle a touch, get drinks, settle in. I don't have to rush people to the table. And I can focus more of my time and effort on keeping the main meal at its peak temperature while guests are mingling. Now, of course, if you want to be doing all of the mingling and stuff like that too, then you might hire a chef like me to come in and cook for your dinner party. Or you may choose dishes that are very easy to hold at their temperature. And so you can just have all of dinner prepared before your guests even arrive. But this welcoming bite gives you a little bit more space so that you have more options. And then the second reason why I really like including welcoming bites, when your guests arrive, you don't know exactly what their day has been like. And maybe somebody has been running around like crazy, they haven't had a chance to eat at all, and they're starving. And so when there are snacks immediately available, they can right away start, satiating that hunger a little bit. And then that way your guests can be more present and enjoy mingling whenever they aren't stressed about, oh my goodness, how long is it gonna be before dinner is served? Like, I'm getting low blood sugar. I gotta get something. And it can also give your guests a little bit of a conversation starter in a way, especially if some of your guests might not know each other well. Any sort of unique cocktail or snack, welcoming bite that you can provide can give people the opportunity to, ask a stranger, essentially stranger, oh, have you ever had this before? Or have you ever tried this combination of flavors before? Or something like that. And for those of us who are a little bit socially awkward, having any sort of like a already set up conversation grease available for us is so appreciated. Okay, so that is the why I like to include welcoming bites. Now let's talk about what these welcoming bites specifically are. And I am going to share with you how to make these, but also at which steps can you prep these components ahead of time, and which steps should be done more closely to when guests arrive. Okay, so our first dish are trout stuffed mushrooms, and these are quite simple, especially if you have smoked trout in your local market. If your grocery store or any markets that you typically go to do not have any smoked trout, it'll probably be retailed right next to the smoked salmon. You could use smoked salmon instead, or you can buy some rainbow trout, just like a small fillet of rainbow trout, and saute that on the stove with your favorite herbs and spices. A lot of times with this, honestly, I'll just do some Old Bay on it because Old Bay goes really well with any fish. And this is really just like a supporting flavor. It's not gonna be the main flavor of your dish. Whether you have your smoked trout or your cooked and then cooled trout, shred it up and then mix that with my favorite is like a Boursin cheese, and I do like the garlic and herb Boursin cheese for this. Mix the trout and the cheese together, and then you'll take some baby portobello mushrooms, wipe those down with a wet rag, and then you can go ahead and twist out the middle stem of the mushrooms. At this point, you can save the mushrooms separate from the trout and goat cheese blend separate. Even if you did this the day before, you could keep those separated in the fridge overnight, no problem. If you want to prep this a couple hours ahead of time, then you can go ahead and scoop that trout mixture into the mushrooms and then put that back in the fridge. I would say you could do this up to about 8 hours before guests arrive. And then about 30-45 minutes before guests arrive, you can go ahead and turn on your oven at 325 for about 20 minutes or so. If the portobello mushrooms that you purchase are rather large, so if more 3-bite type mushrooms, then you might need to go up to 30-40 minutes. And then for a garnish, you can do some fresh herbs, or you could crumble up some blue corn tortilla chips like I did here. A lot of different crackers and easy garnishes that you could have a lot of fun seeing what you like to do best. And especially if your party has a little bit of a theme, then you can easily change this garnish to make the whole dish feel like it leans into your theme a little bit more. So dish number 2 were the chicken pesto crisps. And sometimes I call these chicken pesto bites or chicken parmesan pesto bites. For the rest of this video, I will try to keep it a little shorter at chicken pesto crisps. This is a dish that you can absolutely put together really quick and easily, or you can make everything from scratch and it's still not gonna take that long. But there are so many options for kind of taking shortcuts as you go through this one. So first of all, let's start with the chicken. You could cook your own chicken, and if you do this, I would keep the seasoning relatively simple. Garlic pepper and or Italian herb type blend is great for cooking this chicken, and once it's cooled, then you can shred it and ta-da, you're good to go. Alternatively, you could buy a rotisserie chicken a full rotisserie chicken or those little like packages of already shredded down rotisserie chicken. The first shortcut would be just buying already cooked chicken as opposed to cooking the chicken yourself. The second shortcut would be purchasing an already made pesto sauce versus making a pesto yourself. Whenever you make your own pesto, you get to control, the flavors, how much citrus you want in there, if you want to toast your garlic before you blend it into your pesto. You have a lot more control if you're making your pesto yourself, but there are some pretty good pestos out there on the market too. So maybe buying a jar of pesto is gonna be the way you go this time. And then the third shortcut would be buying like a bag of Parmesan crisp type snacks versus just making Parmesan crisps yourself. Now, making Parmesan crisps, it's truly just putting Parmesan on a silpat or piece of parchment paper in the oven and toasting it. It's not complicated at all. So whether you have all of these components as store-bought items, or you have all of them from scratch, or you chose to maybe cook your own chicken, make your own Parmesan crisps, but go ahead and use a store-bought pesto. However you got to where you're at, where you have these three components, the next step is going to be mixing your cooled and shredded chicken with your pesto sauce. And at this point, you can save this chicken pesto in the fridge for a day or two ahead of time. The Parmesan crisps you're going to want to keep out at room temperature. You don't want those to get cold in the fridge. Personally, if I am going to make Parmesan crisps, it's something I prefer to do the day of, but the day before really isn't that bad either. On the day of your party, I do prefer to have this chicken pesto warm, so I will just put it on in a little saute pan on the stove, warm it up over low heat. If you have a little bit of extra pesto, you can stir that in because the chicken's gonna absorb that sauce a little bit. And if you don't have any extra pesto sauce, but it seems a little bit dry, just add a splash of chicken stock. So like 10 to 15 minutes before your guests arrive, you can start scooping that chicken pesto mixture onto your Parmesan crisps. And then you can garnish that with some fresh lemon zest or some fresh basil leaves or some toasted pine nuts or whatever, your preferred garnish for this dish is. And our third dish is strawberry tomatillo beef. And you might have heard this and been like, what in the world? Strawberry tomatillo? What's going on here? Is a nice little like canape. Now the base of it is a sesame cracker, and this one happens to be gluten-free. And then we are going to just sear the outside of a beef tenderloin, like top sirloin, and then slice that. And then put a tomatillo sauce on top of that, and then pickled strawberry on top of that, which is so delicious, I promise you. So maybe the name of it didn't immediately connect with you and like give you a picture of what this dish might be, but hopefully after seeing it and once I explain it, you'll be like, ooh, this is definitely the next thing I want to make for my dinner party. All right, so this tomatillo sauce is something that you can buy from the store or you can make. And if you have a favorite like green enchilada based tomatillo sauce, something like that would work out well. Now the second component that you want to think about prepping would be your pickled strawberries. And quick pickling at home is very quick and easy. For these strawberries, my like pickling juice, it's 50% water, 25% apple cider vinegar, and 20% white wine vinegar. This is because I do like the sharpness of like an apple cider vinegar, but I want to cut it a little bit with the white wine vinegar. You're gonna add salt to that. And because we're doing strawberries, I will even add a little bit of honey. So if I'm adding, I'll add about like equal parts salt and honey. And that is as simple as this pickling liquid needs to be. So warm up your water, dissolve your salt in it, mix it with the vinegars, add your honey and dissolve that, and then let that cool down. In the meantime, you can be washing and topping your strawberries, and then you can slice them. If you have pretty small strawberries, then you can just cut those bad boys right in half. If they're a little bit larger, then I would cut those into thirds or quarters, because ideally this entire little canape is 2 to 3 bites. So we don't want the strawberry itself to already be 3 bites worth of strawberry. So once your pickling liquid is nice and cool, then you can add those strawberries into that pickling liquid. And as long as you do this 24 hours ahead of time, you are going to be golden. I will say, even if you get the strawberries in the pickling liquid like 12 hours ahead of time, like if you do it the night before or first thing in the morning, you're gonna get enough. All right, so now that your tomatillo based sauce is ready and your strawberries are ready, you can go ahead and get that top sirloin beef out of the fridge. I always like to let my beef warm up about 20 or so minutes on the counter before I start cooking it. This just helps prevent shock to the beef going from a cold fridge right onto a searing pan. Now, before you start cooking that beef, I think I kind of skipped ahead a touch. I love to put coarse sea salt on the beef. That's all that I will season it with. It's just coarse sea salt. I do like that coarseness for like a texture. Now, personally, I prefer to cook this beef in my cast iron pan. Of course, if you're doing this on the stovetop, you could use really any type of pan, that's fine. But you want it over like medium to medium high heat. You really want to sear the outside without fully cooking through the beef. This is going to be a rare cooked beef. Alternatively, you could also grill it. Depending on exactly how this cut lays, you're gonna have either 3 or 4 sides to cook it on. So plan to cook it between 2 and 3 minutes per like side. And after your beef is cooked, you're gonna just put it on a cutting board, let it cool for 10 or so minutes. After about 10 minutes, you can come back to it and you're gonna slice it about as thin as your ring finger. If you are someone who has a little bit larger hands, then target your pinky finger. For me, I like to do it at about the thickness of my ring finger. So it's gonna be, just a little over like a ½ inch thick or so. You don't want it too thick because, like I said, we don't want this to be like a 4 or 5 or 6 bite dish. It should only be 2 bites, and so you wanna be able to bite through this meat pretty easily, but you don't want it so thin that you don't get any of that texture. You're gonna slice all of your beef, and then you can put like ½ teaspoon or so of tomatillo sauce on top of that beef. And then on top of that tomatillo sauce, you will put your strawberries, your pickled strawberry. And then these little mountains, we'll say mountains of goodness, can go in the fridge for a couple hours if you want to. You don't need to prep this part of it right before people arrive. I've made and eaten these like fresh and they're good, but I actually really prefer having the tomatillo and the meat sit for an hour or 2 in the fridge and then serving them. A lot of times when you think of beef, you might think like, oh, I really want that hot. I want people to be able to eat that hot. But I promise you, this one is actually better cold, like cold, not just room temperature, but like cold. And then you can put each one of those little mountains of goodness onto a little sesame cracker. And then on top, you can, again, garnish it with whatever fits your theme. If you have a theme, the best. Fresh herbs are always one of my favorite garnishes. Fresh herbs or microgreens would be great garnishes. Or if you want to keep it super simple, then just leave it with the strawberry on top. So yes, all 3 of these contain some kind of meat. You have a trout, so if you have people who love fish, awesome. And then there's a chicken option and a beef option. I do like that amount of variety when it comes to protein sources. But if you want something that is vegetarian, deviled eggs can be a great option for that. And then another kind of category of welcoming bites that I think get an honorable mention are skewers. And For the skewers, you can make all kinds of different styles of skewers. So like caprese skewers are super simple and, you know, pretty popular. But if you want to switch that up a little bit, instead of tomato, you could put watermelon on there or peaches and make a nice little balsamic drizzle or a balsamic dipping, like reduction to dip the skewer in. Delicious. Also with skewers, you can do like an Italian meat and cheeses or a Spanish cheese and olive skewer. You can do like bacon wrapped dates on a skewer or fruit skewers. So if you want something vegan, then you can just put a few delicious fresh fruits on a skewer. And also a buffalo cauliflower skewer would be super delicious. You can put some cucumber on that and then have either ranch or blue cheese or a little bit of both for people to dip those in. Another vegan option would be to do like a veggie stuffed spring roll. But anything that is hummus based is going to be a pretty great option for vegan. This way the vegan snack has some solid protein there. It's not just like water and air, but it's also going to be flavorful, and there are so many different ways that you can serve hummus, so you can really let your creativity shine with that. Maybe this is something that you're thinking about supplementing in like cocktail hour, like a wedding cocktail hour, and you are over budget and you just need something cheap to get people through. Like a chips and salsa bar would be a great option. A lot of people love chips and salsa, and you're gonna be able to get a lot of different chips and salsas for not that much money. Another little trick would be to use a like crudité platter, like a veggie tray, especially if you are doing like snacks, welcoming bites on a table. Those veggie trays can take up a fair amount of space. They're very easy from a like dietary restrictions, food allergies standpoint. But if you do a veggie tray, crudité is just like the slightly fancier way to say it, but those can take up a lot of space. They're very colorful and beautiful, and they're gonna be significantly cheaper than using any sort of actual like animal protein, like the strawberry and tomatillo beef. So lastly, with these welcoming bites, do you need to do all three of them? Do you need to do more than three of them? Like, let's think through the menu for your event. So I would recommend that for every like dozen guests that you have one welcoming bite. And so if you have like 20 guests, for example, I would have at least 2 different welcoming bites so that there's a little bit of variety without assigning yourself a ton of extra work. So once you get up to about like 60 guests, that puts you at 5 of these different welcoming bites. And that's about where I would cap out the number of different dishes. Yeah, you can have 5 snacks, but if you really want to fill in with a little bit more, then I think that's where you could do a great veggie tray, or like a bunch of crackers, maybe some dried fruits and seasoned nuts, something like that on a platter. So that yes, there is another option, but it's stuff that isn't temperature sensitive at all. Yes, charcuterie boards can be a little bit more expensive, but a large charcuterie board could be another way to fill in that extra item for a larger group. Or even if you only have like 30 people, maybe you do a charcuterie board and like 2 welcoming bites, and that's still gonna feel like a lot of variety, and I'd imagine it's going to delight your guests. I hope that the next time that you host a dinner party or cocktail hour, you feel prepared and excited to create a welcoming bite or a couple welcoming bites to have ready for your guests, and that this video has helped you know exactly what to make and the prep that you can do to get ahead of it. And I hope that you can find a lot of joy in creating these welcoming bites. So if you have some favorite welcoming bites, snacks that you always love to have available whenever you have guests over, or if you have any, little hosting tips and tricks, I would love to hear them in the comments. And if you have any questions, please let me know below. Subscribe for more dinner party knowledge and general cooking knowledge. 2 weeks ago, I posted about some spring produce, how to cook some spring produce. So that could be a fun one to check out, and I'm gonna continue doing those versions of those throughout the summertime. So if you love going to farmers markets and you love picking out fresh produce, but then sometimes when you get home you start to feel a little bit stuck and like, how do I actually cook this up the best way? Be sure to subscribe and stick around and ask me all of your questions related to that so that I can be sure to incorporate the answers into future videos if I cannot answer in a simple comment, like written comment. I'm really not good at writing out comments, you guys. I'm way too long-winded for that. Trying to get better though. Okay, so thank you so much, Chefeteers. I so appreciate you all being here, and I hope that you cook something joyful soon.